Children, obey your parents and the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy a long life on earth.
So yesterday, the choir gave my wife flowers, and I said, that's awesome. I don't have to buy her flowers. But that only worked for a few moments. So I had to pay for my sin for not buying flowers by giving her breakfast in bed. So, all men take notes. That's how you do. Well, I had to keep checking if she's drinking the tea and everything. She finished it, so I'm happy. Today we are looking at very few verses that Laurie read for us earlier. We're in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 to 3. We want to talk about, the sermon title is The Good, the Bad, and the Gone. So just to give you a quick background, Ephesians was written by Paul. The young adults who are attending our Bible study, we've been talking about this. The Ephesians was written by Paul when he was in custody. He was under house arrest, waiting to be tried in Rome. So the first 3 chapters of Ephesians, he talks about the Christian's position in Christ. And then the last 3 chapters, 4 to 6, he talks about the Christian's conduct. But in particular, from chapter 5, verses 22 to chapter 6, verse 9, he's talking about the Christian's responsibility at work and at home. He talks about submitting to one another. Wives, submit to your husbands, and then husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church. And then at the beginning of chapter 6, he then addresses children. He says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. If you remember, this is actually one of the 10 commandments, which is commandment number 5, where God said, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be prolonged in the land which the Lord your God gives you. The problem we have these days is that honoring our parents and honoring our mothers, my wife alluded to this earlier, is that sometimes we think we know it all. In fact, the first problem I want to mention with honoring our parents is that our education or our technology interferes with the honor we should give to our parents. So, if my daughter comes home and says, Mommy or Daddy, help me with this homework, I could do a little bit of geometry, I could do a little bit of this and that, but most of it I say, I have no idea. Call your teacher. But could it be that sometimes kids stop honoring their parents at a point when they think their parents don't know as much as they do? The other problem is that these days, with divorce at over 50%, sometimes parents force kids to love one parent and hate the other. So in the process, Daddy will say, hate your mom, she's evil, or Mommy says, hate your dad, he's evil. And in the end, we cannot honor the parents because we've been forced to pick sides. Thirdly, we don't honor our parents these days because of the blame game. We live in a society that teaches us that your problems are not really your problems. Somebody caused them. So if you can't point at anybody else, point at your parents. They didn't raise you well. Your background is causing your problems today. You are not functioning well in society because of the way your parents didn't know how to raise you. So we cannot honor them because we are told they were horrible parents. Generally, the society we live in does not honor adults. Now, in my culture, when you were growing up, any adult you met, you called them auntie or uncle. You respected them whether you're related or not. With that came the idea that anyone older than you can speak into your life. We have lost that. So what does honor mean? In the Old Testament, as well as in the New Testament, the word honor, and I hope even in our society, is not used for objects or things, but for people. We honor people. We don't honor the car or the house or the computer. We don't honor objects but people. We also honor a particular person. We elevate a particular person. We give them respect. We also honor people based on their position. In the Old Testament, kings, prophets, and priests were honored because of their position. Your parents are to be honored by virtue of them being your parents. Honoring our parents has to be pragmatic, has to be practical. You cannot only honor with lip service, but with action. We know this, that when somebody says, Mommy, I love you, Daddy, I love you, we say, that's okay, but show it. We also honor in public, not only privately. Have you met people who only praise you in private, but in public they act like they don't know you? But in leadership, we are taught that you should correct people in private, but praise them in public. Not to correct people in public and praise them in private. It's important for us to be in the habit of praising each other in public. So, before we go to the good, the bad, and the gone, let me just throw 3 questions at you. Could it be the way we honor our mothers reflects the way we honor God? Secondly, could it be the way we treat our mothers is the way we treat all other people? When we were growing up, our youth pastors used to say, young people, before you date, check how your future boyfriend or girlfriend treats their mom or dad, because that's exactly the way they'll treat you. Could it be the way we treat our mothers is the way our children will treat us? Somebody said, be nice to your kids because they'll be deciding your nursing home someday. Now, the Bible has many examples of good mothers. Actually, in our society, there are many examples of good mothers. In our core, there are many examples of good mothers. Let me just give you 3 examples in the Bible. There are many. But the first mother I thought about was Moses' mother. Her name was Jochebed. Moses' mother wanted to preserve his life and went far to make sure that he's safe and built a little raft that was a basket to keep him alive. But Moses' mother taught him principles and about holiness that were to be shown later on. Secondly, in 1 Samuel we read about Hannah, Samuel's mother. She was also a mother who cared so much for her son that she literally lived in the church waiting for a miracle. And when the miracle came, she literally gave Samuel to the church and said, I prayed for him, God, he's yours. We also hear of Elizabeth and Mary in the New Testament. They were good mothers. I want to give you an example of another mother. She had not seen him in almost a year. She missed him. As she tried to nibble on a simple dinner, her weak appetite failed her. She was too excited. Tomorrow she'll be going to see her son. The domestic violence had caused her to flee to her parents' home after spending a year away from her estranged husband. Her brother-in-law had taken the boy away. The boy was supposed to be gone just for a couple of weeks, but those 2 weeks turned into months, and those months turned into almost a year. She felt cheated, lied to, and robbed. She had to see her boy. Her excitement was obvious. She spent the day walking down the village telling her neighbors of her soon coming trip to see her son. She could not conceal her excitement. Throughout the night, she tossed around, couldn't sleep, just thinking about the next day. She actually had a nightmare where she dreamt that the bus had come and she had missed the opportunity to go see her son. But soon, morning came, she stepped out of the hut to gaze at the orange sun that was beginning to rise as it kissed the eastern horizon. The sun seemed to glide gently over the treetops as if to declare the arrival of a new day, a new hope. The sun's rays began to pierce through the tree leaves and foliage, flooding her face with a glow that uplifted her soul. She embraced the sun's warmth and the promise it brought. She said a prayer and was ready to go. When she got on the bus, she sat on the front seat, gazing out of the window for the whole trip. She wondered if her boy had grown a little taller, if her boy was mad at her for not coming to visit sooner. Her excitement soon turned into anxiety. She started hyperventilating. Her short breaths were interspersed with deep sighs. Her hands shook a little. The little boy cried himself to sleep. He wished Mommy were here. He wondered why she had never come to visit him. Would he ever see her again? Earlier that day, his uncle had beaten him up with a pruned branch. He cried, but no one came to his defense. His older cousin had slapped him in his face and kicked him in the stomach. He cried, but no one came to his defense. The boy awoke as soon as the rooster crowed. The birds were chirping heavenly melodies. The water flowing down the creek behind the homestead produced a harmonious, soothing sound. He struggled to rise from his sleeping area on the floor. He finally woke up and folded his two flimsy blankets. He rolled up the reed mat and placed behind the door of the hut. His auntie had lit up a fire. The firewood emitted a sweet-smelling scent, while the smoke it produced hovered like a cloud just under the grass-thatched roof. Outside, the sun was just beginning to introduce daylight. The towering mountains majestically welcomed the sun's rays. A light wind blew, whistling and swaying small tree branches back and forth. The new day brought hope, even though he felt hopeless. His surroundings revealed normalcy and peace, yet inside his little heart, he was plagued with fear, loneliness, and confusion. Like many days past, he grabbed the white bucket to go fetch water from the well. While he walked down the little path, he dreamed of the big city where he used to live. He fantasized about taking a hot bath in a big bathtub. He wished he lived in a house with indoor plumbing, electricity, and running water. Upon his return, he waited for the water to heat up on the fire while he ate the porridge prepared by his auntie. His uniform was so old, his school uniform was so old, the shorts had holes on the back. As was his daily schedule, he walked to school, came back home, had lunch, and went to watch the cows. He actually hated watching the cows. He wished there would be another life besides this monotonous daily chore. He wished he could be like other kids who after school would play soccer, do their homework, and so forth. His daily dose of school and then followed by watching the cows was followed by regular beatings from his uncle and his cousins was nothing he wished for. Suddenly, he heard the unmistakable humming of the only bus that came from the big city. The boy and his cousin, as is their custom, ran onto an anthill to have a better look to see who would disembark the bus. He wondered if Mommy would come to visit him. The boy's heart sank as the bus roared past his village. Maybe Mommy had forgotten about him. Maybe Mommy didn't love him anymore. Suddenly, the bus stopped. A thick cloud of dust enveloped the bus. The boy looked closer and saw a figure of a woman get off the bus. Without carefully examining, he just started running towards the visitor, yelling, "Mommy is here, Mommy is here, Mommy is here." As she disembarked hesitantly, she saw a boy running towards her, screaming. He was a scrawny little boy with unkempt hair and wore torn clothes. His pants were torn from the knees, and his tennis shoes had holes on the front with little toes hanging out. His big brown eyes confirmed, yes, that was her son. He jumped on her, she embraced and kissed him. Her tears flowed down her cheeks. His sobbing and laughter were like a mixture of joy and sadness, bitter and sweet, yet beautiful. At last, Mommy was here. He would be safe now. She would never let her boy live again. No amount of suffering she would face would pry her love from him. He would vow to reciprocate her love. Let's talk about the bad mom. Bad mothers in the Bible are many. If we can think of Cain's wife, Lot's wife, Rebecca, who connived with Jacob to steal, to trick Isaac and steal Esau's birthright and blessings. Bad mothers are abusive. They don't keep their promises. They don't set boundaries. They don't lead like parents. They want to be their kid's best friend. Mommy, let me tell you something. You are not supposed to be your kid's best friend, but your kid's best mother. They do not discipline their kids. They neglect their children. They are never present. They do not encourage or build up. Mommy, let me tell you, your words matter. Learn to encourage and build your kids. They don't listen. They only talk and never stop to listen to their kids as they speak. Bad mothers do not pray with their family. There's a cliche, which is true. A family that prays together stays together. They don't read the Bible. They don't go to church. In fact, Franklin Graham, who is Billy Graham's son, was asked one time, who is the person who has had the most spiritual influence on your life? And reading his book, I thought, obviously it's Billy Graham. This is Franklin Graham. Billy is somebody that we all look up to. And he says, no, it's not my dad, it's my mother. And he said, every night when I go to bed, she's kneeling praying. Every morning when we wake up, we find her sitting by her chair reading her Bible. That's where the influence came from. A bad mother does not educate her kids. She lets the education be done by other people. Now, there are many times I've preached on Mother's Day. There are many times I've talked about mothers. But it dawned on me recently that I feel guilty sometimes when I call my mother. I feel guilty when I say we have to visit my mother. I feel guilty because on Mother's Day, I pick up the phone and I call my mother in Zimbabwe. However, my wife cannot call her mom, cannot say Happy Mother's Day to her mom. So I felt as a preacher that sometimes I do you a disservice. I talk about good mothers, I talk about bad mothers, but how about those whose mothers are gone? Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Revelation 21:4. You will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, no mourning, no crying, no pain, for the old order of things will pass away when we are in the presence of God. Say hi to everyone. I'm going to wait in the room, Rutendo said. She said this as she descended the stairs to our room. Our room was on the ground floor facing the lake. The jetty or the dock went from the edge of the building extending into the lake, Lake Manmora in Australia. The sun was about to bid the day farewell. It had turned into a big tan ball lingering on the threshold of the sky and earth on day and night. The warmth of the sun was diminishing as a cool breeze swept over the earth. Darkness encroached As light progressively disappeared, the good day was coming to an end. I rushed up the stairs into the office. The School for Youth Leadership building sat on the top of a steep flight of stairs. I walked past a couple of fellow students. The receiver on an old phone with a curled cord lay on the desk. I picked up the phone and said, "Hello." On the other side was a familiar voice. It was my sister. I noticed her voice sounded a little somber. I could barely hear what she was trying to say as she was crying. My mind raced, rather spinning in circles, trying to figure out what news she was about to share. My heart thumped hard, as if it would break my rib cage. She paused for what seemed like eternity. Then she said, "Rutendo's mom is no more." Suddenly, I went blind. My head seemed to go into a tailspin. I didn't hear anything else my sister said. I dropped the receiver on the ground, and I just sat down and wept. The school principal and other students came. They prayed with me. I still didn't know how I would break this news to my wife. After some minutes, I walked down those stairs. I got into the room, and I shared the most difficult news I've ever shared. Today, as we say Happy Mother's Day, I want to remind you that if your mother is alive, honor her, love her. If your mother is bad, recently I preached about honoring our parents, and I showed a picture of a house I built for my mom. Somebody came to me after the sermon and said, "Captain, I walked out when you were preaching. You told us to honor our parents. I hate my parents." And she goes on to tell me all this. As I listened, I said, "Do you know my story?" And I shared with her my story. And I said, "You need to go back to your core and tell your core members to honor their parents, regardless of what they did." So today, in closing, I want to ask us, if your mother is alive and is in here, I want you to go back to them, stand with them, hug them, and tell them you love them. If your mother is not here, I want to ask you to come and let's stand here together. We want to pray that God will heal your broken heart. In particular, on a day like this, when everybody's posting pictures of their mothers, and you're saying, "I wish my mom was here." God has seen your tears. God knows when you cry, and He wants to say, it's going to be okay. I'll miss my mother-in-law, but I say, tinosangana kudenga neropa ra Jesu, which means on that great morning, we shall all meet and embrace through the blood of Jesus.